Hey everybody, David Sinai here. In today's video, we're talking about shooting architecture photography using a drone. Our subject today is a brand new building out on Miami Beach. It's a healthcare facility called the Braman Cancer Center. It's this incredibly modern structure that I actually just stumbled across while driving to Miami Beach about a month ago. As I was driving east and I looked to my left, I caught this glimpse of this amazing building and immediately told my wife, I have to come back here and take pictures of this thing. So that's exactly what I did. I showed up with my DSLR and my drone, but I quickly realized that to get the most of the shots, the ground camera wasn't going to cut it. I needed to get high up into the air. So for this shoot, I used my Mavic 4 Pro. I wasn't really planning on doing anything crazy or complicated, but I ended up learning a few things during the process that I thought would be awesome to share with you. But before getting into the images, a little quick history on the property, because it's really an interesting piece of art. It was designed by a group out of Chicago called Canon Design. From what I found online and from actually talking to a patient who was coming out of the building while I was there, the whole facade was designed to look like rolling ocean waves. But there's a functional reason for that too. You see, they built it that way so those big concrete curves would shade the windows and keep the building cooler in the sun. And on the inside, they put the IV infusion bays right up against the glass so patients can look out and enjoy the view while getting their therapy. The gentleman I spoke to actually told me he saw dolphins swimming while he was there for therapy. Very innovative by the architects for sure. Anyway, back to the cameras. Like I said, I used my Mavic 4 Pro and I ended up using all three cameras. I used the main 28, the 70, and the 168. All of those are full frame equivalents. I experimented with taking just standard shots and also taking multiple frames that I would stitch together to create panos. And of course, everything was bracketed, so I had the total freedom in post to blend the exposures and get a nice high dynamic range image. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation and check out the files, starting with the 28mm lens. Here we go. So the very first shot, this is my first attempt at the building with just the 28. And one of the things that I quickly realized by using the wide angle lens is that you end up capturing a lot more than just, let's say, the building, for example. So here you can see that I was pretty close to this building. And on the left side, I have not a lot of negative space. And equally on the right side, it's pretty tight. I flew the drone as close as I could, and I had a 28, the widest lens that this has. And while I like the composition, there are times when you need to get the entire building or object that you're taking a picture of, and you don't want all this surrounding context in the frame. So on a different shot, and I'll go to my next one. Let's take a look at this shot here. For this image, I was taking a picture of the roof, and I wanted to just get the entire roof in one frame, and I wanted to capture a lot of the detail, a lot of the texture. I wanted to see some of these details that are showing up in this image. So I realized that to do that, I was going to need to shoot a pano, and that's essentially what I did. So this image right here, this final image, is a composite consisting of three compositions, composition 1, 2, and 3. And for each one of those compositions, there's 5 exposures for that one composition. Okay, so in Photoshop, and I won't be going through the details on how I did that today. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube on how to create these panos, and I'll put a link to the one that I followed and really got some value from. But as you can see, we get a lot of detail. We get one shot, and we end up with a really high resolution image. So if you look at this file, it's 16,251 pixels by 9760. So if we were to print this image at 300 dots per inch, if I quickly just take the calculation, it's 16,251 divided by 300. This image is 54 inches wide, which is very significant. That's about 4.5 feet wide. So a very interesting way of really increasing the resolution of your final image and getting a lot of detail. Okay, let's continue. I did the same exact thing with this shot. So here, to create this image, I flew the drone as close as I could, and I had to, I got there when there was no one. You can see there's nobody in the parking lot, but I came pretty close. But I couldn't get this entire building in one shot. So what I did is I took two pictures. You can see here that I came in pretty tight. I wanted a little bit of negative space, and then the other one is on this side. So in the end, I created this, and I feel pretty good. I feel good about. I don't love the really high dynamic range, but when the object or the objective is to capture the structure and make that the entire frame, this tactic worked out pretty well. Okay, let's continue. And now let's look at the 70. And the 70 millimeter lens, and after this, I'll show you what I got from the 168. They're not the same level of camera as the main camera on the DJI Mavic 4. And everything you hear online about how awesome the Mavic 4 Pro is, it's true. It's truly an amazing camera. But if you're deliberate and you use the 70 or the 168 very carefully, you can get some amazing results. So for this shot right here, this was done with the 70, and it's one capture. Well, it's one composition. I manually blended, or I used Lightroom to merge the exposures and create the final image. But what you can see is, if I go here and I go to crop, you can see that I actually ended up cropping a lot of the image because there was just so much negative space. I had tons of water and tons of sky. So for my next shot, I tried to do something a little bit different. And what I did, not that one. For this one, I ended up flying the drone even closer. And I can show you where I was for each shot. So for that very first shot that I showed you where I got the whole picture, I came back to about 1,100 feet, 1,143 feet. And you're probably wondering how I did this. It's actually pretty simple. All you do is I went into Lightroom, came here, I grabbed the GPS coordinates, Command C for copy, and then I just came right here to Google Earth. In the search, I just put in the coordinates, and then I added a marker, and that's essentially how I figured out. It's a getting off topic, but it's a good way of planning your shot. I didn't do that on this one. I just did this after the fact. But if you're planning your shot and you want to figure out how far to be or where to position your drone, that's a friendly little tip. Anyway, back to my point. My point was I got closer, and I ended up just taking two separate frames, two separate compositions, 7 exposures within each one, and I ended up creating a Pano HDR. And you'll notice, and this point is getting a little redundant, but the file is really big. It's about 35% bigger than the other one that I shot when I took the drone further back. And by coming closer, I'm also able to get a lot more detail. So if I zoom in, you can actually see a lot of details in these windows. Everything is perfectly in focus. And yeah, anyway, that's how that one was done. And finally, my last observation specifically about the 70 mm lens. And I have to say that for the kinds of images I was creating that day, I was really happy with the 70. I was, for this particular shoot, that ended up being my favorite lens. Definitely not the best camera. The 28's a better camera, but for my purposes, I got some pretty interesting results. So what I want to point out here is that if you ever need to do, say, an environmental portrait, or you want the environment to be very much part of your story, the 70 does a great job doing that. And you can see that this is South Beach, South Point, these tall buildings all the way back here. That's about a 2 mile distance. If I was to draw a line from here to here, it's about 2 miles. And you can see a lot of those buildings. If you're using the 28, those buildings would be tiny. So I really, really like that aspect of the compression that you get with the 70. Okay. My last one is the 168. So let me just pull up the 168. And I did the same exact thing. I created this, and you'll notice that in this image, we have hardly any negative space. And if I show you the image, this was a pano, but in this particular case, rather than taking horizontal frames like I've been doing for all of the images I've shown you thus far, I actually turned the gimbal on the Mavic 4 Pro and put it into portrait mode. And then I ended up taking 7 frames or 7 compositions, each composition being a total of 7 exposures. So I ended up creating an image with 49 separate files. And this is what it came out, what it looked like right after I stitched it. And then here's the edited version. A couple of things to point out is that you do get some distortion. You know, I did have to play a little bit to get rid of some of the curvature here. This is actually a straight wall. And part of the issue is not the fault of the lens, or it was me. I positioned myself in the wrong spot. So if you see, I took that shot. The 168 was done at the same spot as the 70. And I think part of my issue, you can see here, the wall is perfectly straight. But what I learned is that I did not have the drone dead center. And so had I done a better job centering the camera, I would have nailed that shot. So, but getting back to that image and what we created, I'm really, really amazed. This one was 13,000 by 4,000. And the information and the level of detail that is captured with that 168 is crazy. So you can see a lot of detail inside the building. That is not the point. You know, you're getting hired by an architect. They don't want all that noise. That's not the point of this image. That being said, so as I was saying, back to this image here. Yeah, it's an insanely high res image, and the detail that we're seeing in this image is incredible. So if I just move this, close that, and then I zoom in, you can actually read what it says on the wall. It says Rad Center for Precision Medicine. And yes, that is not why had I been doing this for a client, I would have definitely made the windows dark and consistent and just focused on the form and the lines of the structure. But I did want to point out how incredibly awesome this technique is, because you're really amplifying the resolution of the native capabilities of the camera. And if I show you one more thing, we can see something that I just caught. These frames were captured at 1/25th of a second in the sky. The drone is flying, there's a little bit of wind, and my shutter speed was 1/25th. And yet, look at how insanely sharp this picture came out. They must be doing, there's got to be some insane image stabilization. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something. And it works. It really works. Anyhow, I hope you found this video useful and entertaining, hopefully educational. Yes, it's amazing that we can use these sensors and create these amazing rich files with so much information. But think about all of the use cases and business cases that this gives us. If you're into doing any type of inspections and you're hired to assess the structural integrity of a building, a relatively inexpensive drone and solves these issues so cost effectively. Obviously, if the architect needs a really high res large print showing, creating an image that he can compare to his original design documents to really assess the quality of the construction, to determine whether each of the lines were done correctly. These images help architects with that very specific objective. And I'm happy that I learned the technique, and I'm glad I'm able to share it with you. And hopefully you learned something today. Thanks for watching. So my final image that I did with the 168 was this one over here. And to be perfectly honest, this was not purely intentional, which happens pretty often with photography. The intention was to create another pano, and this was the first frame of that pano. But the pano didn't really come out that good, so I found this one image and thought it did a really nice job showcasing what the architect was trying to achieve with these incredible lines. A little retouching to darken the glass, and little retouching to remove some of the clutter on the left side here. But yeah, I was really excited with this one here as well. So hopefully you learned something today. And yeah, so here's your final 3-part playbook, or the main lessons that I got from the shoot. Number 1, use the 28 when you want the maximum sensor quality and the deepest dynamic range and resolution that's possible from the Mavic 4. If you're able to use it, you should absolutely use that camera first. Number 2, consider using panos. You can't quite get the shot with one lens. Get creative and build the image by taking smaller sections at a time and then creating the final image in post. Use the 70mm camera when the background is very much part of the visual story. Take advantage of the compression that lens gives you, or if it's just an easier lens to use to hone in on your subject and remove all the extraneous details without necessarily having to crop the image. And finally, use the 168 when you're thinking about creating something more abstract and you see some details and you really want to hone in and create some finer abstract imagery. Or it can be an incredible tool when somebody needs you to inspect the facade of a building, inspect a roof. The resolution that you get and the distance that you can be from your subject allows for that type of use case. My recommendations are to use all 3, and each has their purpose and has a specific application. Anyway, that was a fun shoot. I learned a lot. I hope you did by watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing for similar content. Thanks again. Have a great day.